Michigan-born playwright screenwriter Dennis Foon escaped from Detroit in the 70s and scored a ride to Vancouver, which he thought was pretty much paradise, certainly a far cry from the northwest side of Detroit. Foon's secret passion has always been creative writing, which he does with great aplomb. He has degrees in religious studies and the fine arts. He was the co-founder and artistic director of Vancouver's Green Thumb Theatre for about 12 years or so, and he is the talented one who wrote the script for the new film, Life Above All. It is my pleasure to welcome Dennis Foon to Studio 4 to tell us more. Life Above All. It's a wonderful title.
Thanks.
Did you title it, or actually, is that part of a screenwriter's job?
The screenwriter, you know, screenwriters are the low man on the totem pole, to be completely honest.
Really?
And what happened was the book that it's named after, Alan Stratton's book, is called Chanda's Secrets. And the producers felt that they wanted something a bit more universal as the title. And the director, we spent hours and hours and hours brainstorming titles. And then after not coming up with anything, the director woke up one morning and went, I want to call it Life Above All.
Life Above All. Yeah. A set in Africa.
Yes.
Who was Chanda?
In real life? Mm-hmm. Chanda is one of tens of thousands of AIDS orphans in Africa. She's a composite character based on the real stories of kids from that part of the world.
A tough subject.
Really tough, yeah.
The AIDS pandemic, and not necessarily in the poorest parts of South Africa.
Not at all. I mean, the village we were in the township in the north of South Africa, Ellensdoorn, 80% HIV. And, you know, things have changed enormously. I mean, the amount of awareness and the kind of programs that are going on are tremendous. A lot with Canadian help, as a matter of fact, yeah.
But still, the shame and the secrecy and the prejudice
it's still alive and well.
Is alive.
Yeah.
And much of this story unfolds around the country's widespread secrecy and shame around HIV/AIDS.
Absolutely, and which is really the theme of the movie, much more than just AIDS per se, you know? I mean, that's not what we set out to do. We really wanted to talk about family, and ultimately at the core of the film is a child's love for her mother. And what any of us do, our bond to our parents, particularly the mother, is so huge. And that was the thing that we really wanted to talk about.
And children raising children.
Absolutely.
The mother gets sick, the child has to raise the family, the child has to experience death of a sibling, of siblings, of neighbors, and somehow carry on.
Absolutely. When I was in South Africa, we visited 3 homes that had been run by children. This one girl that I met was about 14 years old. Her parents had died 3 years before. She was raising, at this time, the brother was 4 and the sister was 9. Okay, so she had been raising that little brother since the time he was 1 on $30 a month. That's 1 bag of maize a month, right? Wow. And at that time, when I met her, she seemed like a pretty depressed kid. The brother was now 4, he was losing weight. In other words, he was showing the symptoms of HIV, late stage, right? So we were like, it was just completely heart-wrenching. And the house had been broken into. Some boys, or men, had smashed the windows of the house and had come in to sexually assault her. Neighbors heard her screams and stopped it. When we saw the situation, we all chipped in and had bars put on the windows and helped her. But, I mean, that's one person.
Yes. Well, and why so many children with HIV/AIDS? Children with HIV/AIDS. Some comes from the mother or the father.
Right.
But some of the girls, the young girls, are selling themselves to the truckers.
They are, or rape, which is very, very common, yeah.
Sounds funny to say, of course.
Yes.
But it is part of their daily life. As the screenwriter, so you've read the book, it's grabbed you. Where do you begin? You went to Africa, I know, to Soweto, to the townships, what?
Well, actually, where I started was, I got a call from Alan, the novelist, who's an old friend, and he said, you know...
Oh, he's an old friend?
Yeah, and we
Perfect.
I know him from Vancouver. He was the Vancouver Playhouse, and I was at Green Thumb, and we had connected then. And then he, several years later, we were both published at the same time. Our publisher, Anik Press, here in Vancouver, we reconnected here. His book and my book both came out at the same time. And then he called me one day and said, would you be interested in adapting my novel? And he said, I met these guys from Germany. They're really interested in it. And I went, sure, absolutely. Are you kidding? It's a great book. The next thing I knew, I was flown to Berlin for meetings at the director's apartment in what is now called Berlin, but it was East Berlin.
Right, but I like this.
It was totally cool.
I was flown to Berlin.
I loved it.
Mm-hmm. Of course. Good start.
But what was really, really neat was the two producers and the director left their cell phones and their egos at the door, and we walked into the apartment, and we spent 3 or 4 days just talking about the project, what we wanted to do with it, what was important, why we personally felt so drawn to it, the material, what the problems and difficulties of it were, and who the audience really was for it.
And who is the audience?
Everybody. You know, it's really a story for adults about a child. Obviously the book was written for young readers in the sense of a youth, and it's certainly appropriate for teenagers. But it's obviously very edgy, hard-hitting material, but with an enormous amount of hope and a huge amount of heart. Right?
And whatever you did with it caught the attention, as well as what the director did and certainly the actors, because it's not a cast we know of the Cannes Film Festival, and one Roger Ebert.
Yeah,
Tell me about you going to Cannes.
Okay, I'm just going to sip of water and I'll tell you.
Perhaps you should, because rumor has it the film got a standing ovation in France.
More than a standing ovation. We were invited to, we were an official selection, which in itself, I think we're the first film from BC in 15 years or something that had been invited to a certain regard, right?
Right.
So I got there, and I'm like, it's surreal. I mean, it's Cannes, right? Yes. I'm just, I
hi, Brad. Hi, Angelina. Hi, Tom.
And when we did the red carpet, and we had our pictures taken in front of the Mediterranean, and there was the director and the actors had their photographs taken by this press gallery of 100 cameras, and we're standing there watching this thing. I mean, you see it all the time, but to be part of it is quite different. Then we go into the theater. It's 1,000 people in this theater, just a gigantic screen. We had to go up on the stage and introduce it. And then at the end of the film, I'm sweating it because you don't know what they're going to. They boo. The last film that they'd shown, they booed. The people were booed out of the house, right? They'll shout, they'll scream, they'll boo, they'll walk out. And
who are they?
The audience, and a lot of critics.
Where are they from?
I guess
all over the world. The critics.
Critics from all over the world, basically, yeah, and film people. But I think the majority are critics.
Right.
So
it's rather rude that they boo.
The knives are sharp,
Okay.
The credits start rolling, and there's this sort of smattering of applause, and I went, oh God, thank God they're not booing. And then it started to build, and then it exploded, and these lights came on our row, and it was just our row lit up, and we looked, and we realized the entire audience was on their feet, crying, and cheering, and clapping, and apparently the French press, they clocked it, a 10-minute standing ovation. We're just in complete shock. We're all hugging each other and crying too, right? And as I'm just shaking, and as I'm walking up the aisle, this woman stops me and says, my husband would like to congratulate you. And I look, and there's this man, and he's got his throat all bandaged. And he goes, it was Roger Ebert.
Yes.
And he followed me out, and he insisted on meeting the entire cast and crew, took everybody's pictures with him and of them, and then blogged it in his column. And the next thing I found out was that he and the two critics from Time magazine, the Corlises, who had done a full page on the movie, on Time magazine, had dinner the next day with the head of Sony Classics Films. And he hadn't heard of the movie, and they just raved about it to him. And it was Michael Barker, and he engaged the film to be a distributor of Sony Classics, which in itself was pretty amazing.
Yes, hence we can now see it at Fifth Avenue.
Exactly.
It's in the movie theaters. Yes, all the way. Well, it's tough subject matter, but it's very powerful, and subtitles aren't everybody's thing, as you know. But something about how the film's shot or directed or written, you forget their subtitles, and that's good.
Yeah, well, there's two things that are really, I love that you said that, because for me, what I think the subtitles do is you feel privileged, like you're being led into a secret world, as opposed to having to read stuff.
Right.
And I mean, as a writer, what I was trying, my job was to find a visual language for the film, to find a way to tell it in pictures. Right.
I understand.
So I was very, it was wonderful for me to see it and have people's responses to it, where they just go, I was completely taken into this world. And after all, that's what you're trying to do with film, is take people to another world.
Of course.
Right?
Well, I know you had a lot of fun experiences at Green Thumb.
Yes.
But this may have topped it. Dennis Foon, our guest. We'll come back.